All right. Yeah, you can hear me okay, right? Yes. All right. I'm genuinely loud, so if I'm too loud, just let me know. I'll keep it down. The title here is interesting. I wanted to keep this a little bit different, stand out from the crowd. This is a little bit technical as well, so I'll go technical and then go non-technical as well, right? So, but if you have any questions, just let me know. Very quickly, who am I and where am I from? I'm from a company called WSO2. We've been around for nearly 20 years. We're based in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. We focus on middleware technology for digital transformation. So which is, how do you do integration? How do you expose these integrations as APIs? So you need an integration platform. You need an API management platform. How do you do custom identity access management, like single sign-on, multi-factor authentication? That's CIAM. And then this concept of internal developer platform where you put everything together, let platform engineers build stuff, let software engineers build stuff. That's what we do. So as a company, we are core technology for any type of organization, not just healthcare, not just payers, providers, startups, etc., but retail, hospitality, banking, finance, any organization to build their core technology. We have around 800 plus customers in 90 countries, but our core software stack is open source. So we have around 25,000 deployments globally as well. Some of our larger customers in the healthcare space is GE Healthcare, who's here, Kaiser Permanente, so on and so forth, right? But that's all I'm going to talk about the company. I'll get to the topic, which is from code, right? So why do you need to write code? Everyone needs to build unique digital experiences, so coding is important, right? So I'll be talking about that. To cloud, right? So how do you go to cloud? What does that mean? Cloud means private cloud, public cloud, multi-cloud, whatever. In minutes, so in minutes means you need an accelerated model, right? So do you have pre-built stuff for healthcare? Do you have pre-built integrations, pre-built connectors, right? With Ballerina, Ballerina here is the name of a code name of our technology, our integration technology. It's a programming language as well, but it's a language built for integration, and it's a language built for healthcare. I'll go into details for that. And then if you are in this day and age, you need to add AI in there. I'll show you some real-world examples of how AI is used. So you can write a prompt and generate the code as well, right? So you had this concept of low code in the past, but now it's like AI driven, right? So you just write it in natural language for healthcare apps. That's the agenda. This is what I'm going to cover. I'll come back to this topic at the very end to see how we've covered it. Now, why code? Why is this a technical session? Because every organization is either a software company or a software-enabled company, right? If you need to compete, if you need to build unique digital experiences, you need to build stuff. Yes, you can buy stuff off the shelf, but you need to have a core tech team and start building stuff, right? So that's what we believe in, and we provide technology for that space to help with that, right? Now, get this to work. So let me talk about Ballerina first, because the first part of my session is about code, right? Ballerina is an open source language which we created in 2016, right? It's a batteries included language. So if you know, I'm going to get technical a bit, right? So if you program in Java and you use the Happy library in Java, or you program in .NET and you use the FHIR libraries for .NET, or if you program in Python or Spring Boot or whatnot, right? Building healthcare applications is not easy. You need to build the core stuff. You need to do HL7 to FHIR conversions. You need to connect to EMRs, EHRs. You need to bring libraries to handle this, debugging, so on and so forth, right? So in Ballerina, it's different. We built core technology, which has a visual view as well, right? And I'll go into some of these things. Like I said, it's open source. Right? You can take it, you can run it within your ecosystem. You can build microservices out of it and run it, right? So there's the website ballerina.io. Just go and look at it and try out some of those samples as well. In today's day and age, you are dealing with APIs, you're dealing with services, with JSON, with XML. You're not dealing with COBA and RPC and all these old technologies, right? Most of the languages were built in an era when you were dealing with these technologies. So we built Ballerina to deal with JSON. So it knows JSON natively. It deals with databases. It knows databases natively. It knows HL7 natively, so on and so forth, right? So So this is just an IDE of Ballerina, right? People talk about low code, right? So the low code approach, yeah. But you have the AI code version as well. So for example, you write a preview, you write a prompt saying, okay, I want to build this application that connects to Salesforce, that pulls information, that connects to Twitter, sends that information out in this message format, and then logs this information. So that's a prompt. I can write that in natural language, right? And then get the AI prompt to generate code for you, right? That's one way. You then have the low-code way, where you have a drag-and-drop diagram. You say, I want to add a Twitter connector. I want to add a log connector here, which does this logging. So you have a low-code approach. Or third, you have a code approach, a pro-code approach, where you actually see the underlying code. This is full code. So the ability to switch between these three modes whenever you want within the flow is very critical for developers. If you are a low-code developer, you want to stay in this mode. If you are a hardcore developer, you want to stay in this mode. But in between, you would want to switch between modes. A typical enterprise would have developers from different modes who cover different modes, right? So that's one of the core focuses we focused on in Ballerina. I'll just let this video run. I'm just going to forward this to where the prompt ends. But this is a typical prompt, right? So let's say write a service that connects to maybe an Epico Cerner, takes the information in HL7 v2, converts it to FHIR, maybe logs that information, exposes it as an API in the IPS or patient access rule, CMS 9115, add API authentication, etc. on top of it, right? So that's just plain English, right? So AI code is basically the ability to write code, and this is very healthcare context aware as well. But I know there are folks who are not from the healthcare background here. So this is an integration language at the end of the day. And as you can see, I don't know whether you can see the whole thing. It takes the prompt, you write the prompt, it generates the code for you. And then, as I showed in the previous screen, you can go from this code to your low-code view. You can go to the diagram. You can go to a sequence diagram. You can insert the code, so on and so forth. And you can keep iterating to build out your applications. Now, this is a typical use case that would take maybe a month to build in a typical scenario. In this case, it builds out the thing in minutes, right? So my title was in minutes, right? So that's the whole idea. AI is an accelerator for building code. Healthcare, pre-built healthcare templates is an accelerator for building all of this, right? Let me switch to the next one. Oops. All right, so a few more features. Documentation, right? This is an example of the code being written on this one, the left-hand side, and then the sequence diagram being generated on the fly on the right-hand side. Why sequence diagram? Because that's a natural way that developers and architects think, right? So even if you go back to the UML days, you think in sequence diagrams. If you take code, most of the code is integration today, right? Gartner says that more than 75% of code is integration. You're connecting to an EHR, you're connecting to a database, you're connecting to 100 SaaS apps. So the sequence diagram shows you parallel processing. It shows you different network calls. It shows you different integrations. So it's a natural way of doing documentation. A second part is any integration or any code today involves APIs, right? Because someone needs to consume that code. Even if you write it as microservices, someone needs to consume those microservices. So handling APIs, handling REST, handling POST, handling JSON, having basically an API console is part of the platform itself. And all of these are, by the way, Visual Studio Code, just a VS Code IDE that we're showing here. We just have plugins to VS Code, so you download VS Code and install the plugin, right? A third part of integration is data mapping. We worked with a few healthcare customers, and more than 70% of the use case is really mapping data from one format to another. Now, this can be well-known formats, like you can go from, let's say, HL7 version 2 to FHIR. That's a well-known problem, so we can automate that problem. We can use AI, we can use pre-built stuff to automate the problem, right? But if you're going from a custom format, let's say you have patient data sitting in a database. It's not HL7 v2, it's not CCDA, and you basically need to map that data and produce FHIR, right? That's a custom data mapping problem. So again, we have a UX way of saying, source system, destination system. Here's a visual way of mapping this data. Again, you can add AI to this and say, LLM, look at this problem and map the data for me, right? So go into it and do it in an automatic way. So we do have that AI capability to do data mapping as well. But data mapping is a big part of development today as well. So just taking a step back. So as I said, Ballerina is a generic integration language, right, to build microservices. Very easy compared to building it in Spring Boot or Python or Java, etc. There are different tools that the language supports. And today's talk is going to focus a bit more on the health tool, because of course this is a healthcare conference, right? But then if you are looking at orthogonal problems, like you want to build in GraphQL, you want to do Open API, you want to build async specification APIs, all of these are basically included in the language. So what does Ballerina do for healthcare? Unlike Happy for Java and FHIR for .NET, we built all of these healthcare constructs inside the language itself, right? So this is an example of, I don't know whether you can see this, but this is like calling the patient R4 version. So you can say, I want to build a patient object. It knows what a patient object looks like for US and for Europe, etc. Right? If you go to Switzerland, for example, and if Switzerland comes up with a new FHIR specification that is derived from from international, then you can feed that into the tool, and that will auto-generate all of the things for you, all of the abstracts for you, right? So it's quite expandable. So this is an example of working with FHIR. FHIR server is also inbuilt into the platform, right? So if you need to expose these as FHIR, if you need a capability statement, that's inbuilt into the platform itself. Similarly, it understands HL7, right? Again, I'll share these slide decks if you scan, but you can see the HL7 message being called inside the language itself, right? So similar to normal text, right? You call the HL7 message, and then you can start working on the HL7 message within the language itself, right? Similar to how you would treat JSON and XML and so on and so forth. So the language understands FHIR, HL7, the multiple versions really well. I spoke about data mapping. Now this is specific for healthcare. So you can see on the left-hand side of this picture is a patient access profile. So it's a well-known data structure. So we can use AI because it's a well-known data structure. On the right-hand side is a custom data format, right? So again, once you have a well-known structure to custom format, you can use AI. But it's very simple. So what we're saying is function returns a patient object, and we know what a patient object looks like, right? So it's all part of the language. This is, we are doing a FHIR to X12, right? So if you're going X12 to FHIR, HL7 to FHIR, again, a data mapping problem. So again, I'm just showing the visual UI here, but you can always click and go back to the actual code because there's 100% fidelity and parity between code as well as the visual flow. And this is not a DSL. Again, I'll get a bit technical. Most low-code platforms, you can draw stuff. It'll create an intermediate language called a DSL, right? That language is not a 100% representation of the underlying programming language, which might be Java. We skipped the DSL step and said, you need full power. So you either create it visually, or you go all the way down and code, or you keep going back and forth, right? So you don't muck around with the DSL because you hit a wall at some point because you need to develop fast, right? So that's the code part. So what I covered so far is the code part, the acceleration part, how do you build it in a couple of minutes? There was a little bit of AI sprinkled in there. Now what's the cloud part? How do you get this story to the cloud, right? So from my example, you can literally build a healthcare production dev code in a couple of minutes, right? So I showed you the prompt. You just write the prompt, it'll create that for you. You keep iterating a few times, you're good. You test it, you're good. Now, how do you get this onto AWS and Azure and everything? This is a second product. It's called an internal developer platform. It's all the rage these days. Right? There are multiple products. The product that we have is called Choreo, right? So you can test that out as well. Now, in software engineering, there's a problem. People can build code, but then you need to do all kinds of stuff to get that code into production. You need to look at what your zero trust is. You need to look at whether this runs on Kubernetes. You need to figure out who has access to write this code, and which API can this code call. There's so many things, right? CI/CD, all these things. In most large enterprises, you have people called platform engineers who deal with some of these things, right? But it's still a problem. So what we said is let's solve this problem. Let's make it a platform-less problem where you don't focus on that bottom part. You focus on the problem above the table, which is I want to get my business logic into the cloud, right? So that is Choreo. Choreo is a platform that takes any code, not just the Ballerina code I spoke about, but your Python code, your Java code, your .NET code, any code that you build, and takes it through all the phases to get it into the right cloud, right? So how do you do zero trust around this? How do you have a service mesh for this? How do you do CI/CD for your code? How do you push it to these 5 different Kubernetes clusters? How do you scale those clusters? So on and so forth, right? These are all enterprise software engineering problems that you need to deal with when you're doing actual development, right? So we built a platform that focuses on all of that, again, regardless of what language you build your code in, right? Now, my talk is about Ballerina, but you can build it in a Python as well. So what happens then is, for example, let's take a healthcare use case. Let's say you have Cerner in one of the customers, and you need to connect your consumer to Cerner, right? So in Choreo, what you would do is you'd create a thing called a project. There are some pre-built accelerators that we have, like let's say I want a Cerner connector, I want a HL7 to FHIR converter, so I just drag and drop those into my project, and that Ballerina code gets deployed automatically. Automatically, it adds an API gateway for this as well. It adds a service mesh to that as well. And then you can keep adding pre-built components, and you can bring your custom code in as well. So bring your own code, right? Bring your Java, bring your .NET. And this basically can be done really in minutes, maybe an hour, right? So you can basically set this all up. Internally, what happens is this is setting up Kubernetes, this is setting up the AWS environment, this is basically setting up your CI/CD, all of that, right? But you can accelerate development by using an internal developer platform, right? This is a production environment of a healthcare use case. Again, you can't see the details here, but that's a FHIR capability statement if you have a FHIR server. This is a patient to FHIR service which converts from HL7 to FHIR. So these are actual microservices running inside one of those projects, right? This is just a visual view. So if you are a startup and you need to connect to multiple hospitals, that then becomes easier because you build these projects and say, here's one connectivity to Epic, here's another one to Cerner, here's another one to so on and so forth, and each of those has many details, right? So expanding from code to this model is quite easy in this space. So I think I have 2 minutes left, but that's the gist of the talk. So if you remember the title, it was from code, which was about Ballerina, to cloud, which is the internal developer platform, in minutes, right, which is the AI angle and the pre-built healthcare accelerator angle. And that's basically the gist of the talk. So we have a booth here. We are, I think, 3115 in the first exhibitor pavilion, right all over there. So just drop in. If not, we'll be around here. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Some of the links are there. Again, my name is Mifan Karim. You can find me on LinkedIn. And any questions, happy to answer that. And thank you very much.